Check, check, mic check. Check, check, mic check. Hello. Welcome to Podcast Envy. I'm your podcast boss, Andrea Klunder. It has been a little bit since I have had a Podcast Envy episode for you. And, well, I'm not sorry. I have been hard at work for my clients, working on producing shows for my clients. And well, there's a few other reasons, but I'll get into that in a moment. So I just wanted to come in here with a year-end episode that will probably be live in the Podcast Envy podcast feed in that weird week in between Christmas and New Year's. So right now, in this moment that we're streaming and recording, it is Friday, December 22nd, and we are heading into the Christmas weekend. And regardless of where you are, what I don't want to do is I don't want to offer you another recap, roundup, or year in review episode. Nope. I actually personally, as a podcast fan and as a podcast listener, I don't really like the roundup episodes at the end of the year. I look into my podcast feed and I'm like, 2023 recap, year in review. I tend to skip those episodes, to be 100% honest. It's not my favorite strategy. And the other thing I am not offering you is a New Year, New You episode. I am not here to do some high pressure sales tactics about everything that is lacking or any ways in which you are not already sufficient in what you are doing. I'm not doing that. In fact, I thought I wanted to sell something in January, something new, offer something new, a coaching program, a consulting package, something like that. And then I realized I don't. Winter is that time of year for me when I kind of want to slow down. I want to be reflective, and I don't want to just be reflective until the end of December. I want to have a little bit more time to be reflective as we move into January and February. I don't want January and February energetically to feel like a hustle or to feel like a rush. And so I wanted to give myself a little bit of that space to continue to support my clients at the Creative Imposter Studios and to continue to percolate on some ideas that I have. Because right now in this moment, I am technically on my own winter holiday break. I am not technically working, but I wanted to come on here and have a podcast conversation with you, even though I am on break. Because what happens to me is as soon as I give myself a legit break, I'm not talking about a weekend, I'm not talking about 24 hours, I am talking about a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks off, a chunk of time. What happens is that my brain suddenly starts giving me all of these new ideas, all of these new visions, all of these hey, what about this? Hey, have you thought about this? Hey, what if you did this? Hey, you know what would be really awesome for that client? Hey, you know what you could do is that always happens to me when I start to slow down. Can you relate? You take some time off and suddenly all these new ideas for projects or services or new podcasts or new episodes or new content or new videos or new social media or whatever. It just starts crowding into your brain. So I am at once bursting with new ideas and also trying to tell myself to stay in the slow place, stay in the calm place, stay in the winter holiday break place, and don't go launching into a million new things. However, the reason why I'm here is because things are changing. Things are changing both slow and fast, both slowly and quickly, fastly. I want to say fastly, but things are changing everywhere. I guess things are always changing. Anybody who's studied Buddhist philosophy knows that the law of impermanence, nothing is permanent, everything is always changing. And that may be true, but there are some times when I feel or observe or experience that things are changing even more than usual, or even more significantly, perhaps, than usual. And I think that that is something that is happening. And I am actually pretty excited for 2024. 2023 had a lot of ups and downs for me, a lot of downs, to be honest. And that was one reason why I wasn't creating any new content in Podcast Envy or in the Creative Imposter, my other podcast, which has been on hiatus for more than a year. Podcast Envy has been on hiatus for several months. And the reason why I wasn't really putting out any new content was, yes, partly because I was very deep in creating some really outstanding content and providing services to my existing clients. One of my shows that I produce on behalf of the Santa Fe Opera's Department of Community Engagement, their special program, Opera for All Voices, we actually won some podcast awards at the Signal Awards this year. So we won 2 awards. We won a silver award for Best Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion episode for their podcast Key Change. And we also won a bronze award for Best Music Show, also for Key Change, which was really, really awesome. And so I have been creating really great work on behalf of my clients, been very happy with that. For myself, I stopped doing streams, I stopped making episodes. And the reason why, besides just being busy producing content on behalf of my clients, was that I didn't really know what I wanted to say. And I'm not someone who can be consistent with putting out podcast episodes, putting out shows, putting out live streams if I don't have a clear idea of something that feels significant or feels useful or feels important that I want to say. Like, I can't just talk about whatever. I don't like it. I'd rather say nothing than to say something that feels like nothing for my audience. And then the third reason was that this year, 2023, for the majority of the year, this started actually at the end of 2022, but into 2023, and for most of the year, I personally was experiencing major burnout. I did not feel creatively inspired. I felt frustrated with things that I see going on in the podcast industry, in the podcasting space. I felt uninspired by my own work. I felt like things needed to change. I wasn't happy with the financial picture of what was happening in my business. I tried a few things. They didn't work out the way I wanted to. I worked with a couple of coaches. I worked with a couple of therapists. I was like, is it me? Is it the industry? Is podcasting coming to an end? All these shows that I love to listen to as a fan, as an audience member, are getting canceled due to lack of funding, due to advertising, due to Spotify shenanigans, due to whatever. And I kind of started to doubt whether I was in the right space, whether I was doing the right kind of work, whether I wanted to continue on this path, what needed to change for me. Were my clients getting results that they wanted to get? What needed to change for my clients? All of these things were crowding into my mind, and it made it feel like the act of opening my laptop lid was like some feat of supernatural strength. That laptop lid weighed 1,000,000 pounds, and I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to work. And yes, Alejandro, hi. So good to see you. And yes, I was not only burning out, I was burnt. Burnt. One of my clients recently posted an Instagram, and she's in a different industry, and she was saying that a lot of her colleagues and people in her profession and in her industry were feeling burnt out and crispy. And so, yes, I was in the crispy stage for a while, for many months this year. So it's pretty hard to release motivational or educational content about podcasting when you're in the crispy stage of podcasting, for sure. Even though I love my work, I love the business I've built, I love the work I get to do every day, I love my clients for the most part. I love my clients. I love my team members. I love my colleagues. And yet I didn't want to keep doing what I was doing. And I was like, does this even matter? Does it even work? Does podcasting work? Maybe no one should have a podcast. Maybe podcasts shouldn't even exist. All of that wasn't true. What that feeling was a need for change. It was things changing that were changing whether I wanted to or not. And not just me, but on a wider scale. I think that podcasting as a medium, as a tool, has changed and is changing very rapidly right now. And as such, I feel like we need to also change. We need to go with that flow and move in the direction that the current is taking us, and then get our feet underneath us and figure out where we land, where we fit within that new current, within that new flow. So I read some reports. There's some good studies that have come out recently that have shown some of the challenges that a lot of content creators and podcasters and small business entrepreneurs who are using podcasting in their work and in their visibility, some of the challenges that we've been facing that are very real that have to do with this change. And so I was thinking about this podcast episode that I wanted to create, and I've been kind of percolating on it, and I was like, maybe I'll call it not another recap episode or year in review episode. And then I was like, okay. And then I was thinking, maybe I'll call it permission to change. And then I was like, nah, not permission to change, because you don't need my permission to change. But what I do want to offer is a double thumbs up. If you are considering changing something up in your podcast strategy, I think that you are very wise to consider what you could do differently or how you could do something different in the year ahead. So I mentioned that I originally was thinking I wanted to sell, promote, offer some new package or coaching program or something like that in January, because I know that people are making changes. I know that people are starting new projects. I know that people are going in different directions and may need some support. And I didn't want to put something together that was all that complex. So I have an idea, which is something really simple that I do want to offer. If you are already decided actively making changes with your podcast, with your show, or if you're thinking about it, or if you are feeling stagnant and stuck, and now you're like, I need to change something, but I don't know what that is, I can help you be intentional. Like when a client texts me and they're like, hey, I have this idea, I already am 5 steps ahead of them in okay, this is how this can work. And I love being a brainstorming partner to point out opportunities that they may not have seen, easier ways of going about something, more efficient ways of going about something, or potential pitfalls that they may not have considered yet that I can hopefully save them from falling into. And what I do with my Creative Imposter Studios clients is I offer a New Year dreaming session at the end or the very beginning of the year, in which we sit down for about 45 minutes and we talk through whatever's on their mind, whatever isn't working, whatever they're frustrated with, whatever they have questions about, whatever they're thinking of, whatever they want to try. And we figure out what a good next step and path forward is going to be. And that's usually only available to my existing production and editing clients, but I have a little bit of flexibility in my schedule in January. So what I do want to offer is a New Year dreaming session for anybody who is not currently on my client roster. This is a one-time opportunity. I'm only offering it for the month of January 2024. It is a paid session. You will tell me a little bit about what's going on for you. I will listen to your show, and then we'll get together and we'll talk through some different ideas, and then you'll get a follow-up from me. So if that New Year dreaming session sounds very appealing to you and you feel like you could use a thought partner to talk through some of these ideas, these different possibilities, and make sure that it's something that is grounded in your purpose, then I would love to invite you to email me directly. I am on the borderline of Gen X and elder millennial, I guess. And so I still love email. So you are welcome to email me, andrea@infuselife.net, and say New Year Dreaming. And I will send you my private calendar link to schedule that session, answer any questions you have about how the New Year Dreaming session works and what is included. That's andrea@infuselife.net, and we will schedule a time. Now, as I said, I've been percolating on this episode and I wasn't really ready to record it and I didn't really make notes, but I felt like I wanted to say it now because I was going to send this message out to my current clients in the Creative Imposter Studios. They were going to get this message first, and then I was going to release it publicly in my own feed. And then what happened is that, just this week, I got a text message from one client who was like, hey, so I know you're on break right now, but I have this idea and I wanted to run it by you because I'm super excited. And so we texted back and forth because I love nothing more than new ideas, especially when those new ideas are actually really brilliant and spot on. And so I was texting back and forth. this is probably a special series in your existing podcast. You don't have to launch a whole new show. And we were talking about how that would work and how to position it. And then we go about our separate ways. And then today she's like, okay, I've already recorded like my first 2 episodes and I'm ready to go, but I know you're on break. So don't do anything yet. I'm just telling you that this is what's happening and we're going to move forward because I'm tapping into something that my audience, my community needs right now. And so I'm like, yes, let's do that. Because I think one change, one clue as to where you can look for change is, what does your audience, your community need right now? What are they struggling with right now? Because when you started your podcast, when you started your show, you had an idea in mind, probably, of what you wanted to offer to your audience. Maybe you had a clear view of who your audience was. Maybe you were still figuring that out. Either way, I think you had a problem in mind that you were solving, or something that you wanted to speak to. Or if you've been following Podcast Envy over the past 12 months or so, maybe there was something in your space, in your field, in your industry that was status quo that you wanted to change, that you wanted to impact, that you felt could be better. And you created your show, you started your show around that concept, around that problem that you were solving, around that thing that you were offering to your community. And maybe that was a year ago, maybe that was 5 years ago for some of my clients, 5 or 6 years ago. And maybe you've been plugging along, chugging along, moving along, flowing along, however you've been going along, and you felt great and it was working and it was making a difference and people were joining your podcast and your audience was growing. And then something happened. Either you became bored or disillusioned with your show, or your numbers kind of stagnated or maybe even dropped, which a lot of people have been seeing. So if that's been happening to you, don't worry. That is pretty normal right now, like across the board, that's happening to a lot of people. And so maybe that happened. And it's not that you suddenly are doing something wrong. It's that your community, your audience is also changing. I love Karen says, phew, I'm going to assume, Karen, that is related to the idea of the numbers stagnating or dropping. That's what I'm going to assume you're responding to, of that happening across the board to everyone. So maybe what's happening is that what your audience, what your community needs right now is changing, is different. And there is a way that you can meet what they need right now if you can tap into that, if you can listen to your community, listen to your audience. What is it that they need? And how can I shift? You don't necessarily need a whole rebrand. You don't necessarily need to shut down your podcast and start something new. But maybe there is a shift that you can make that better addresses what your people need now. And that's what my client was tapping into. And so hence the change is a special series within the context of her existing podcast. And also, as she's a small business owner, a specific offering, paid offering for her community tied into that need that she'll be addressing for free on her podcast. And so brilliant. Yes, perfect timing. Let's do it. Another client also emailed this week. We know you're on break. See, this happens to everybody. You go on break, you slow it down, and suddenly all the creative ideas come. So it didn't just happen to me, it happened to my clients too. And I think I knew this, which is why this episode was percolating in my mind before they ever reached out to me. And then when they reached out to me, I was like, okay, we need to talk about this now. The other client actually is creating a whole new organization. So there's a whole new entity being created from the work that they've already been doing. And so they are keeping the podcast, but doing a rebrand to fit with this new direction that they're going. So what that looks like yet, I don't know, but we need to schedule a time in the first week of January when we are back from break, because my clients are awesome and they respect boundaries and they're like, we're excited and we want to tell you, but don't do anything yet because we know you're on break. So I appreciate that. Just a heads up that yes, we will be meeting the first week of January. Let's get that on the books now so that we're ready to go and everything is up to speed with the new direction and with the rebrand. So again, that is a response to things shifting in the landscape of the industry in which they are. And I'm going to pull up this comment from a few minutes ago from Bree. 2023 was all about change, trial and error, failures and wins until I found my footing. But just like Dory, I just kept swimming. It has just been in the last few weeks that the changes I made have begun giving results. Yes, 100%. And that is where we are as entrepreneurs, as small business owners, as content creators, as podcasters, is everything is all about trial and error and failures and wins. And when things are feeling stuck, when things aren't quite moving the direction that we want, or things are backsliding, that is, I mean, in my experience, my humble experience, that is a perfect time to tap into what is within our ability to change, what is within our ability to shift. And so I'm looking at my clients who are already making changes and already deciding what is going to shift for 2024. And then also wanted to speak to those who are like, podcasting isn't working. Why isn't it working? Why isn't my show working? Why isn't my show growing? Why aren't my numbers growing? Why aren't people buying the thing? And I think that rather than jumping to the conclusion that podcasting isn't working, this is a brilliant opportunity to look at what has changed and what is changing. Now, the clients, you have to be the expert in what is changing in your world, what is changing in your industry, what is changing in your business, and what is changing for you personally, because so much of this is about us, right? What do you need to do differently? What do you need differently? And then what I function as a producer, strategist, and consultant is what is changing in the podcasting landscape or in the media landscape or in the social media landscape. What is changing over here that we can use some tweaks in this space to match the tweaks and the adjustments that you're making in your space, and how can those things come together and be integrated so that we're not just trying to use the same old strategy, the same old content, the same old messaging, the same old tactics. What can we creatively come up with together that may or may not work? And sometimes as a consultant, I get nervous because I'm like, well, what if I say like change this thing or try this thing or do this thing? And what if it doesn't work? What if I'm wrong? And that's where I have to remind myself that I don't have all the answers. I have a lot of ideas that can merge with your ideas. And then that's where the trial and error, as Bree mentioned, comes in. Like, let's play within that space and try something and see how it works. Because trying something, even when you're not sure whether or not it will work, is better than doing nothing and feeling frustrated or missing out on an opportunity. I'm going to pull up this message. As well as a podcast producer, host, and coach, I spent time listening to where podcasters were struggling, then pulled from my experience. And now I am also a podcast ad broker. Ooh, that's exciting. Connecting small biz to podcasts with sponsorships. And that for sure, podcast sponsorships and advertising is for sure a space that has changed a lot in 2023. And I could go down a whole rabbit hole about that, but I won't. Not now, not in this moment. But yeah, things are for sure changing around monetization. And I do want to quickly speak to, actually, I hate that word. I hate the word monetization. I feel like it's a fake word. I don't like it. It also feels a little dude bro-y to me, to be honest. However, changes are happening in terms of finances, in terms of money, in terms of clients and podcasters who weren't really that concerned with making money from their podcast. Like maybe their podcast was brand building, community building. Maybe their podcast was for marketing products and services or for events. Or maybe the podcast was the product in terms of like a nonprofit organization doing outreach and providing something of value in and of itself. And it wasn't necessarily that the podcast needed to generate revenue or money, but things are changing in the financial world and in the economy. And so there are people who are now interested in how to make their podcast efforts more affordable, more efficient, or to actually earn some income or revenue, at the very least to offset costs, if not to actually make an income. And so that is something that has been shifting in terms of what people are looking at. And I do have a few ideas around that as well. But all of this to say, really, truthfully, is just that things are changing. Things have changed. Things will continue to change. And it's a good idea to get creative and have an open mind about how to use everything that you've built up already with your podcast and with your audience and with your content, and to see how can we use this in a smart way to meet those changing needs, both for myself, for the business, for my audience, for the community. And when I say I mean you. You are thinking about this for yourself. You are thinking about, what do you need to do differently? What does your business need different? And what does your audience, your clients, your community, what do they need that may be different than what you offered last year, that may be different than what you originally started the concept of your show? And this is your green light to go ahead and switch it up. And that might be a product offering. Maybe you shied away from directly selling your product offerings on your podcast because you didn't want to feel salesy, but maybe now is the time to commit to that and to see how you can integrate that into your show in a way that feels authentic and feels right to you. Maybe it's about your messaging. Maybe there's some new topics that you need to address on your show this year that are not the normal topics. Maybe you're going in a slight curvy direction in another way, another direction that you want to lead your audience and your listeners. Maybe the purpose of your podcast, where it fits into your organizational model, where it fits into your world, maybe it's different. Maybe it's shifted away from being marketing for your products and services, and maybe now it needs to be an income generating asset. Maybe it was community building and networking, and now it needs to shift into more of a direct marketing tool. There's so many different shifts and changes that we can make. And what I want you to think about is how you can do that intentionally for a reason, not just I feel like I need new cover art and new music. I mean, maybe, but why? Why are you changing that specific thing? Is it just to have something new and different? Or is there a particular reason why that is going to help support you and your bigger goals, your more important intentions for the new year? I think that's it. Green light, double thumbs up if you're thinking about making changes, big or small, and encouragement to be really intentional with those changes and to not feel like you have to know that they're going to work, that you can experiment. And Bree says, I really got a lot out of this. Appreciate your passionate advice. Don't fear change. Listen to your audience and try new ideas. That is the perfect summary for this session and this episode. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for distilling my top of mind, back of mind, now front of mind ramblings and thoughts on this into a very succinct piece of advice. I really appreciate that. And I thank you for being a part of my listening community. And if there is something that you feel like you're needing as a podcaster, as a producer, as a content creator, as a small business owner who is dabbling in or fully invested in podcasting, if there's something that you're needing support around, or a question that you have, or a change you're trying to make, reach out to me and let me know. That's Andrea@infuselife.net, because even if we don't end up booking a private call together, maybe I'll create a podcast episode about it. You never know. Podcast Envy is produced by your podcast boss, Andrea Klunder. That's me. The Podcast Envy theme music is by Valentin Sosnitsky, courtesy of the Free Sound Project at freesound.org, and our podcast Angel music is by Benjamin Mastropolito, also on freesound.org as Lemon Cream. All music is licensed under the Creative Commons. Our episodes are mixed by Edwin Ruiz, and hey, if you want your show to sound as good as ours, hire us. Put the magic audio mojo of the Creative Imposter Studios to work for you. Thanks so much for listening, and here's to making your podcast the envy of everyone else.